I'm Mara. I'm 29 years old, and I never expected a Thanksgiving toast to be the moment I finally woke up. But that's how it happened, at my parents' dining room table in Charlotte, North Carolina, surrounded by people I had been quietly saving for 2 straight years until the last thread snapped. I had been covering my brother's life for all of it, his rent, his car insurance, his studio time, all told, somewhere north of $42,000. I did it because my parents told me that's what family does. I did it because he was this close to making it. I did it because I didn't want to be the person who let him fall. I stopped doing it because he looked me in the eyes at Thanksgiving dinner and told a room full of people that I didn't matter. I'm a financial analyst at a mid-sized firm in Charlotte. I budget, I plan, I track every dollar because that is literally my job. I know what a basis point is. I used to max out my 401(n) every year before I started redirecting that money into someone else's dream. I drive a 2014 Subaru with brake pads that have needed replacing for 8 months. And I live in a one-bedroom apartment in Noda that I love but can barely afford anymore because my real money has been flowing one direction for 2 years and it wasn't towards me. My brother is 32, 3 years older. He moved to Nashville when he was 28 to pursue music, not performing in a band, not writing songs for other people. Just him, his guitar, and his idea of becoming what he called a content creator in the music space. He had a YouTube channel, an Instagram, a SoundCloud, and a level of confidence that never seemed to run low. He was charming and funny, and when he played at family gatherings, everyone said the same thing. He's really got something. I said it too, I meant it. The first time my parents called me about helping him out, it was $200. He needed groceries. Nashville was more expensive than he'd expected. It would only be for a month or two while he got settled. I said yes without thinking twice. He's my brother. I love him. $200 is not nothing, but it is not going to break me either. But 2 months became 6. The groceries became rent. His roommate moved out and suddenly he needed $1,600 a month for a one-bedroom in East Nashville. My parents called with their voices soft and heavy, the way they always do when they want something. "You're so good with money," they would say. "He just needs a little runway. You understand how these things work. You can afford it." I couldn't, really. But I said yes again, because they were my parents, because he was my brother. Because I had been saying yes to both of them my whole life, and I didn't know how to stop. By the end of the first year, I was covering $1,900 in rent and $245 a month in car insurance for his truck. He had let the policy lapse and couldn't legally drive to his gigs without it. I was also sending him a few hundred here and there for equipment, a new mic, a software subscription. It added up to around $24,000 in year 1 alone. I know because I tracked it. That's what financial analysts do. We track things. I just didn't know what to do with what I was seeing. My parents never asked how I was doing. They would call Sunday nights to give me updates on his progress. How many streams he had this month, how a music supervisor in New York had reached out, how he was building something real. They never asked about my savings. Never asked if I'd taken a vacation. Never asked about the brake pads I kept putting off. I was the stable one, the one who'd figured it out. I didn't need anything. I tried talking to my brother about it once, maybe 8 months in. I drove up to Nashville for a weekend and sat across from him at a bar on Gallatin Ave and said, as calmly as I could, that I couldn't keep doing this forever, that he needed to think about some kind of part-time income to bridge the gap. He looked at me the way you look at someone who doesn't quite get it. "I'm at a critical moment," he said. "I can't split my focus. You know how this works." I did not know how this worked. I knew how compound interest worked. I knew how to read a balance sheet. I did not know how someone could look their younger sister in the face and tell her that her financial security was less important than his critical moment. But I didn't say any of that. I drove back to Charlotte the next morning and kept sending the money. The second year was worse in a quieter way. I stopped fighting it internally. I just adapted. I stopped putting anything into my Roth IRA. I stopped building my emergency fund, the one I'd been growing since I was 23. I stopped letting myself want things. Trips, new furniture, anything that cost money and wasn't someone else's necessity. Every time I spent on myself, I felt it like a small guilt. My brother needed me. My parents were counting on me. The responsible one. That was my role. And then came Thanksgiving. We were all at my parents' house in Charlotte, my mom and dad, my uncle on my dad's side who is ex-army and runs a landscaping business now, and has never in his life stayed quiet when something is wrong, my aunt on my mom's side who had driven up from Colombia, and my brother who had brought his girlfriend for the first time. I had never met her before. She had opinions about everything and volunteered to say grace without being asked. The food was good, the conversation was fine. My dad told the same stories he always tells. My mom had made 2 pies. I was starting to relax genuinely, for the first time in weeks, when my brother stood up. He had his wine glass in one hand. He cleared his throat the way people do when they want a room's attention, and he got it. I just want to say, he started, smiling around the table, that I'm grateful for this family, for this food. He paused, his eyes moved to me just for a beat. Some people spend a lot of energy trying to make themselves feel necessary. And then there are the ones who just are. He raised his glass, to the ones who actually belong here. There was a half second where nobody moved. Then my dad raised his glass. Then my mom. Then my brother's girlfriend. My aunt looked at the tablecloth. My uncle looked at me. Every eye in that room had gone to me the moment he said those words, not because they agreed, because they knew exactly who he meant. I didn't say anything. I picked up my phone like I was checking a text. My mom made a small noise. Relief, maybe, that nobody was fighting. My brother sat back down and put his arm around his girlfriend. I opened my banking app. I went to recurring transfers. I found the $1,500 rent auto payment scheduled to process in 11 days. I canceled it. I found the $245 car insurance payment set to go out the following week. I canceled that too. I blocked his Venmo so he couldn't send me a request. The whole thing took about 3 minutes. I put my phone face down and picked up my fork. 4 minutes later, his phone buzzed. He picked it up. I watched his face from across the table, without making it obvious I was watching. I saw the exact moment he understood what he was reading. The color left his face like a light being switched off. His girlfriend leaned in. He shook his head slightly. He set his phone back down and picked up his wine glass, but his hand wasn't steady. My dad leaned toward me. What did you do? Low, careful. I looked at him. I smiled. I said, I'm done. I finished eating. I helped my mom clear the plates. My aunt touched my arm when she passed me in the kitchen and didn't say anything, just pressed her hand there for a moment. My uncle caught my eye from the living room doorway and gave me one slow nod. My brother came into the kitchen when my mom stepped out. He shut the door. My rent is due in 2 weeks, he said. I know. You can't just cancel it. I have a lease. The payments were always mine, I said. I was just letting you live off them. His girlfriend appeared in the doorway. She said I was manipulative, that I'd been holding this over him for years, and this was me finally showing my hand. I almost laughed. I untied the dish towel from my hand, folded it on the counter, and walked out the back door. I sat in my car in my parents' driveway for 4 minutes. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shaking. I felt like I had put down a bag I'd been carrying so long, I'd forgotten it wasn't supposed to be mine. I drove home. I didn't answer the 3 calls from my mom that came in before I reached the highway. 2 weeks passed. My brother sent texts I read and didn't answer. The first one said I was ruining his life. The second one said I was jealous. The third one said I needed to think about what family actually meant. I thought about it. I thought about it a lot, and then I thought about $42,000 and went to sleep. It was my aunt who called. She asked if I could meet for coffee. There was something in her voice, not urgency exactly, but wait. We met at a Panera on the south side of Charlotte on a Tuesday afternoon. She ordered soup and didn't eat it. There's something I've been sitting on, she said. After Thanksgiving, I can't anymore. She told me that the previous spring, she had been visiting my brother in Nashville. He had stepped outside to take a call. She was sitting near the window of his apartment and could hear enough. He was talking to someone, excited, laughing, about a licensing deal. A sync licensing firm had picked up several of his tracks for use in a streaming platform's promotional content. They'd paid him in advance. $25,000. My aunt hadn't said anything at the time because she wasn't entirely sure what she'd heard. She thought maybe she'd misunderstood. But after Thanksgiving, after watching what he did at that table, she had called a friend of hers who works in music rights in Nashville and confirmed it. The deal was real. It had closed 8 months before Thanksgiving. 8 months. I did the math right there at the table. 8 months ago was March. March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October. Every one of those months. I had sent $1,845 in rent and car insurance. That was $14,760 I had paid out while he was sitting on a $25,000 advance he had never mentioned to me once. I looked at my aunt across the table. Why didn't he just tell me? She didn't have an answer, but she had one more thing. Your parents knew he'd had some kind of good month this spring. He mentioned it to them. They didn't push for details. They just kept calling you. I drove home with both hands on the wheel and the radio on, and didn't hear a word of it. That evening I opened a note on my phone and wrote down every payment I had made in the 8 months since March. I added it up twice. Then I typed a message to my brother. I'll be looking to recover $14,760 in transfers made from March through October. Please respond by end of month. I hit send and made tea and stood at my kitchen window for a while looking at nothing. He didn't respond that day. Or the next. He called on the third day. I let it go to voicemail. He said I was being vindictive. He said the deal was not as large as I probably thought. He said he needed me to understand where he was coming from. I listened to the whole thing. Then I called my bank and had a conversation about my options. The fallout came in stages. His apartment building notified him that the November payment hadn't come through. He paid that one himself. The first time in 2 years he had covered his own rent. But he couldn't stretch to 2 months in a row. Not with what he'd spent of the advance on equipment and 2 trips he'd documented on Instagram. He was out of that apartment by December. He moved in with his girlfriend. Within 3 weeks, they were fighting about money and space. By January, she had asked him to leave. His truck insurance had lapsed the day I canceled the payment. He hadn't caught it for several weeks. In December, he was pulled over and cited for driving without valid insurance. He had to pay a fine, set up SR22 coverage, and his premiums, when he finally opened his own policy, were considerably higher. He texted me about it. I read the text. I didn't respond. My parents called more in December than they had in the 2 years before combined. My mom's messages were long and circling. She talked about the holidays, about family, about how things had gotten so complicated without her understanding why. My dad left one voicemail where he cleared his throat for 10 seconds and then said simply, "Mara, let's talk." I wrote them both a message that said I needed some space, that I loved them, that I would be in touch when I was ready. I meant every one of those 3 things. My uncle came through Charlotte in January for a work trip and we got brisket at a barbecue place on the west side. He's not a person who circles around things. I saw it all at Thanksgiving, he said. What your brother did, what your parents didn't do, what you did. He cut into his brisket. You held your head up. I'm proud of you. Coming from him, that meant something real. My grandmother called in February. She's 78 and doesn't call often, but when she does, she gets right to it. You did what your parents should have done 2 years ago, she said. Don't let anyone make you feel small for it. I held the phone against my ear for a long time after we said goodbye. It's been about 6 months since that Thanksgiving. I want to tell you what my life looks like now, because I think that's the part nobody ever talks about. What actually happens after you stop? I restarted my Roth IRA contributions, automated, first of every month, 15%. I hadn't contributed in almost 2 years. I did the back of the napkin math on what that had cost me in compound growth, and I let myself feel it for about an hour, and then I moved forward. There is no use staying in the math once you already know the number. I finally got the brake pads replaced. I took 4 days off in March and drove down to Savannah by myself. I stayed at a bed and breakfast on Jones Street. I ate shrimp and grits with a line out the door and no reservations, and I waited happily because there was nowhere else I had to be. I walked along the river in the evening and watched the cargo ships move slow on the water. And I did not think about my brother or my parents or the $42,000 for most of it. That felt like a kind of progress I hadn't known I was waiting for. The anger is mostly gone, not the hot kind. I never had much of that. The cold kind, the kind that sits in your sternum and makes everything taste a little flat. That has mostly cleared. What's there now is something I'm still finding the right word for. Clarity, maybe. The feeling of knowing exactly where your edges are and deciding to stay inside them instead of endlessly extending them for people who never once asked permission to cross. My brother texted me in April. It was short. It said, "I know I handled things badly. I'm figuring stuff out. I read it 3 times. I still haven't written back." An apology that doesn't include the word sorry is a complicated thing to know what to do with. What I keep returning to is this: I spent 2 years so afraid of letting people down that I let myself down instead. I kept saying yes because I thought that was what love looked like. I thought being needed meant being valued. Those are not the same thing. I know that now in a way I couldn't have explained 2 years ago, and I know it costs something to learn it. Money, time, 2 years of compound growth, a lot of Sunday nights spent dreading a phone call. If you're sitting with something like this, if you heard yourself in any part of this story, if there's a version of this living in your own family or your own bank account, I want you to hear this clearly. Saying no is not the same as saying I don't love you. It just means you have decided to stay inside your own life. It means you have chosen yourself. And that is not something you owe anyone an apology for. Thank you for being here. It means more than I know how to say.